We have prescription drugs. We need to know about scheduled drugs. We need to know about over-the-counter medications, dietary supplements, orphan drugs, and even designer drugs. Now here we have an example of an old school prescription pad and the paper, each individual sheet that came out of it. In modern technology, they're all based on this form. They were first defined in around 1950. And prescription drugs are drugs that can only be given to a person who is under the direct supervision of a licensed healthcare provider. And these are medications which can only be obtained by having this form, this prescription. The abbreviation for this is RX. This comes from the Latin recipiere, that is to take or to receive. If it's RX only, it must appear on the drug packaging from the drug manufacturing. And that means this medication is only given out by prescription. This is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, which defines the differences between prescription medications and over-the-counter medications. And the big differentiation in between those two is really safety. There is a large margin of safety if I'm an over-the-counter medication. Bad things are less likely to happen to me. That is not true with prescription medications, where there is what's known as a narrow range of safety, and bad things can happen relatively quickly unless you're being directly supervised by someone like a physician. One of the things we should talk about with prescriptions is the whole concept of scheduling for controlled substances. What are controlled substances? The Food and Drug Administration, along with the Drug Enforcement Agency, has created a list of chemicals they consider either as having a potential for addiction, a potential for abuse, or both. And on the slide behind you, you have a list of the different schedules. Schedule from Schedule 1, which says that there is a high abuse potential and no accepted medical use, all the way down to Schedule 5, which says that there's a low potential for abuse of this particular chemical and there's a very highly accepted medical use. And levels 2, 3, and 4 are variations, that is, degrees of potential abuse and the amount of potential addiction. Interesting enough, if you look at the examples in Schedule 1, they include things that you might consider, yeah, that would be dangerous and potentially addicting, like heroin, ecstasy. But LSD, there's really been no component that LSD has an addicting quality. It doesn't necessarily have medicinal properties, although in the 21st century, they are exploring ways that things like these substances known as hallucinogens, this also is like psilocybin from the mushroom, they are being used to help treat PTSD and depression. Those trials are pretty early. Also, you'll see here, Schedule 1 is marijuana, and this has been a huge topic of contention. And you may have heard that recently the Biden administration is working to change the schedule of marijuana. Now, it's not going to legalize marijuana. That's not the intent of that passage. It was simply to move marijuana from a Schedule 1 medication, which there was a high abuse potential and very little medication capabilities of that substance, down to a lower schedule where it would accept that there are medicinal values associated with marijuana. Here we have an example of the way we categorize the different schedules. On the left, we have Schedule 2, in the middle, Schedule 3, and on the right, Schedule 4, all based on Roman numerals. And the capital letter C refers to the fact that these are controlled substances. The C with the IV in it does not mean that it's designed for intravenous use. It is the Roman numeral 4. Let's look at the different schedules. Schedule 1 is defined as being extremely high potential for abuse and addiction. In other words, if you're a Schedule 1 medication, there is currently no approved use. If you have a possession of a Schedule 1, it is considered a felony. It is not available under any circumstances, including with a prescription. And again, these include heroin, LSD, marijuana, methaqualone, peyote, and ecstasy. Stepping down from that is Schedule 2. Now, Schedule 2s still have a high potential for abuse and addiction. However, these chemicals have approved medicinal uses. They do require an official form which explains that not only are they scheduled, but they are restricted. And these are medications in which the consumer usually gets a limited amount of these chemicals. These are used for severe physical and psychological problems, and severe physical and psychological abuse and addiction may result from these medications. Examples include amphetamine, cocaine, codeine, fentanyl, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, meperidine, methadone, methamphetamine, methylphenidate, morphine, oxycodone, phenobarbital, Percocets. These are all medications which in our society, particularly in the late 20th century, many of our communities were destroyed by a flood of these different chemicals. Schedule 3 has less potential for abuse and addiction than Schedule 2, but still have a medicinal value. These are also currently approved for medicinal use. And moderate physical and psychological dependence may result. Examples of these include dronabinol, paregoric, oxandrolone, and testosterone. Schedule 4 medications have less potential for abuse and addiction than Schedule 3 medications and are also currently approved for medical uses. These are limited to moderate physical or psychological dependence may result from these chemicals.